Our guest today is many things, but I think of her as a builder. So many developers today don't know a cavity tray from a damp course, but our guest had her feet in the trenches from a very young age. Welcome, Rosey Cassidy.
Thank you very much for having me.
For those that don't know, Rosey runs a group called the Newman Rose Group. Newman Rose Group, or
Newman Rose, we call
Newman Rose. Why don't you explain a little bit about what Newman Rose is in relation to not the development side, but the education side?
Yeah, so myself and my business partner Tyler have two businesses. Newman Rose, which is the development kind of vehicle, but then we have got an education business as well, which most people, if they've seen my face, it's for an ad for that. That's actually just been rebranded into Property Ed, so that's now called Property Ed.
Okay.
And in essence, the development product is it's how we and how my family business and how many developers run a development business, how they find deals, how they source deals, secure them, the planning process, funding it, legals, construction. I just call it the A to Z. It's one product that does one thing, and it teaches you what you need to know in development and how to implement that into your business.
Do you see yourself as a builder? Am I right in saying that?
I've never been asked that. I wouldn't say I see myself as a builder, just because when I think of builder, I think of like my brother who's a bricklaying contractor, or my dad who's like driving diggers and everything. But I do see myself as kind of like quite a hands-on developer.
And to what extent would you say that knowledge and experience of being like your brother, your father, so on, being around builders at least for your whole life, to what extent do you think that has benefited you in being a property developer?
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
One, just because, like I say, that base level understanding of how a construction site runs, what the next stages are, what's good quality, what's bad quality. Yeah. But I think more than anything is, a lot of my family are tradespeople. A lot of people who are good family friends are tradespeople. I get on really well with these people. And I've seen developers who rub trades up the wrong way, who have sites that don't run well, site managers leaving every 5 minutes, because they don't treat these people, one, with the respect they deserve, and secondly, they just can't kind of speak their language. They can't muck in with them.
It's the language.
Whereas, I have no issue kind of getting my hands dirty, doing what I need to do on site to muck in with the lads.
It's a tribe, isn't it?
It's a tribe, and I love that about building sites. Yeah. That's why I like being on a building site, is actually the tribe of the people. I love the sorts of people that you get on.
The banter, the camaraderie.
Yeah, like that for me, that's a really big thing, and I've grown up with that and in that, and so I can speak that language. But for the same reason, that means that I can say, this cavity wall's a mess, clean it.
Yeah.
And, the brickies won't be like, who the hell is she?
Yeah.
She knows,
they know
that they have the respect back for me. So for me, it's fundamental, not so much in the knowledge, but just the practical application of it, I think is invaluable.
So if we, again, come back to the fundamentals, acquisitions, planning, big one, obviously pre-construction, construction, and then on to sales and marketing and so on. What have you found? Because one of the things about the Newman Rose is that you are exposed to seeing so many people come through and fail and succeed and so on. What do you think out of those fundamentals, what areas really trip people up, and what do people suffer with if they're not strong on those points?
For me, the biggest one that if you get wrong, then just kind of makes everything else really difficult and doesn't allow for any other errors, is buying wrong in the first instance. Acquisition. So if you've bought well and then you have an issue with the build, typically you can absorb that because you've bought well. Whereas if you start the kind of process having basically overpaid for the land, you have no margin then for it to mess up later down the line. If funding costs change, if your capital structure changes, if you need to raise some equity, you can't because the margin's not there. You may have to then, instead of main contract, subcontract, you may not then have the skill base to run that site, and then it's very stressful. It's all because you bought wrong in the first instance. So yeah, it's 100% the acquisition. Yeah,
when an asset is toxic or is realised to be toxic, it is then, and everyone will run Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
for sure. And it's at the start of the process that you do this. And if you do that wrong, it's like the whole journey.
I was always taught that, and this is true not just for property development and building, but also for, rental portfolios, whatever your strategy might be in the property game. I was always taught that you make your money in your first move.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Buying right. I agree. It's in any property acquisition. Obviously, for me, it's in the context of development, but, of the property investors and things I speak to, again, it's the same concept.
We've had the House Builders Association newsletter come out this morning.
Okay.
So I've been perusing that before you got here.
Okay.
So many interesting things, but I really think of it almost as an existential threat to SME independent house builders. Do you think that's dramatic, or?
I think it's a massive threat, because, decision making and planning aside, just the timescales at this point mean that, unless you're sat on a land bank or unless you've got the perfect deal structure in terms of pricing and timing, SMEs are just going to be getting wiped out, and it's not worth it anymore. The margins at the end, by the time you add in the SIL, the finance costs, because typically these SMEs aren't super cash rich, the finance costs, the change in build costs, GDVs coming down, for all that stress, it's just not worth doing anymore. And for the time, we could be talking now 3-year deal cycles for, let's say, £500,000 profit. But by the time you split that over 3 years, for the amount of stress that's gone into it, facing bankruptcy, they're just not going to do it. They'll find something else to do.
I got an email this morning from Rico that said he gave me a bunch of data, and there is some new information that's come out that I believe it is basically 2 years to get planning. So from the point of acquisition, you're talking a 2-year period for anything of around 100 units size.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
If you look at the Birmingham City Council housing strategy for 2023 to 2028, brand new document. I'll be honest, I haven't read it word for word. It's a very long document, but I've looked at a lot of the infographics and the stuff that their conclusions, let's say. It's all focused on social housing and homelessness. And as we say, as you've said, I'm saying it too, it's not that we're saying these aren't issues. Of course they're
massive issues.
But it's not factored into the calculation that the housing market in general becomes more affordable and so on if you allow the free market to do its job. Yeah,
100%. And the delivery of the products that are affordable, social needs, emergency housing, things like that, they require the open market to bolster them. And if we don't support the open market fundamentally, we can't support the social needs. And it's like, for example, the 106 contribution on that site you mentioned, £1.4 million, whatever. Yes, there should be some sort of contribution. That's, a silly amount. And what the issue is now is, well, if the site doesn't go ahead, you're not going to get any of those houses. You're not going to get the affordable that comes with it. You're not going to get the investment into the local area, the jobs that come through the construction phase, the money that's spent in the construction phase, and you're not going to get any NHS contribution. Because if you agree to something reasonable, you get, I always say 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And this is and I've got this issue on Cambridge, that each element of planning, each element of the government, of whatever, they only think about their own situation, i.e. I'm an NHS trust, all I care about is getting money for the NHS. Don't care
about housing.
If it means we can't deliver the housing, if the site doesn't go ahead, we don't care, we just want our money. Affordable housing, we just want the affordable housing. They don't realise that, well, if the site doesn't work, you're not going to get any you're better off, and it's actually the developer that has to navigate all of these.
Solutions.
Come up with creative solutions.
Work with the developer.
That's the fundamental. Work with the developer. And councils are harder and harder to work with. They won't speak to you. They won't talk to you. They won't engage with you. And I think it's putting the SMEs out of business. It's making so many sites literally unviable. You cannot give all the things that are needed and keep the bank happy, because the money has to be there for the site to work. The banks aren't happy. And then ultimately there does have to be enough profit in the deal, because this isn't a 9 to 5. This,
Yeah.
you could literally go bankrupt over these deals. So yeah, there should be, most developers I know might be making like 60 grand a year.
Oh yeah,
you could get 60 grand a year in a corporate job, and you would sleep a hell of a lot easier at night.
You have to love this. Yeah, they say you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps. That's our industry
for sure. So 100%. I think at the minute, viability is one of the biggest constraints for development sites and for SMEs as a whole rule. And I think it comes down to the fact that nobody just stops and looks at the bigger picture. That's what the developer has to do.
Yeah.
But everyone just thinks, oh, we're greedy so-and-sos for it. No, we're just trying to deliver the sites. We're trying to just do our job, and we want everyone just to work together to do it in a way that works for everyone. But everyone just wants everything out of the deal. And when you pull everything out of the deal, there's nothing left to actually deliver it.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of, I think, where we're at.
That is really what I'm seeing, is that there are real veterans of what we do, people far more long in the tooth and experienced than you or I that I speak to that are getting out. Yeah. They're saying, we're gonna work on our rentals.
It's not worth it anymore.
Yeah, it's just not worth it.
It's all their experience that you're losing as well. It's not just them as a company. Yeah. These people have such experience to navigate some of the issues that come in, and they'll just go, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So, the talent pool of trades, of knowledge and everything, it's just dropping and dropping and dropping. And I don't see it.
And then we'll end up left in the hands of people that are aggressively pushing for things like sort of modern methods of construction. Another big topic, very very interesting. And there's, again, brilliant things coming out of it. But the way I see modern methods of construction is they're solutions. They're not a paradigm shift. Agreed. They should be used when they solve an issue efficiently, and there's a challenge that can't be bridged or can't be solved with traditional methods. Brilliant, bring in a modern method. Not to try to shift the entire industry to building houses in factories and then transporting them to site and plugging them in.
Yeah.
We've done them. We've done fully finished in factory builds. We've done a prototype with Warsaw Council. It's interesting. There's a lot to learn, but much like electric cars and these sorts of things, it's like horses for courses, and we mustn't be pushed too fast in this progressive future direction from the political side, like you say, with policies like we're discussing, or on the actual practical things like the methods of construction.
Agreed.
Otherwise, we'll just burn ourselves out. And
I think as well, I'm a big fan of traditional builds and the quality that can come with that. I think one thing I've had this conversation quite a lot is, at the minute with the building regs, the environmental regs, build speed, everything that's needed is pushing us towards a lot of this prefab, offsite, timber frame, all these sorts of things. The issue I have with that is, okay, great, short term, you're ticking a box. Where are these buildings going to be in 50, 60 years time? They're going to have to come down and be rebuilt.
Yep.
If you build something of quality with good fundamental design and good fundamental bones, you can repurpose that building over and over again.
Why don't you tell us a bit about what Newman Rose have got on at the moment?
Yeah, so the main project that we're about to break ground on is one in Cambridgeshire, 17 units. When we first saw this site, it had outline planning, a good consent in the sense that it had some significant massing, but a bad consent in the sense of the designs were awful. But we knew there was a lot to be done there. So the intention was we would buy it, drag out the purchase a little bit, buy it, change the planning, good to go, happy days. And in the past, done stuff like this, no issue. Talking 8-week, 12-week turnaround.
Yeah.
You can run the tender alongside that. All good.
Yeah.
So The planning has been in kind of 3 phases. One, the Section 73 amendment to planning, which was to increase the massing on the site, change the designs, change the road a little bit, make it a bit smaller. That wasn't actually too problematic. They wouldn't let us run the landscape reserve matters with that.
So that's a separate amendment?
That's the reserve matters that come after an outline application.
Okay, yeah.
So we had to wait until the Section 73 was approved before they would consider what trees would go on site. But we're like, okay. So now we're starting to get kind of delays, but we're thinking it's a landscape.
It's bureaucracy.
You know, and it's some trees. What could be an issue?
Yeah.
The issue was, well, first of all, we just had our architect do a plan, which we've always done in the past, put some trees on there, give it a Latin name, happy days.
Yeah. They love their Latin names.
Yeah, love the Latin names. No, we just put some green, you know, sturdy trees that you find locally. Cool. And I've never had an issue with that historically. Because people are like, oh, you should have used a landscape architect from the get-go. No, you very rarely have to use one. We did in this instance.
We've been forced to on our current one.
Yeah. This landscape architect put forward, and it's not necessarily criticism of the landscape architect, I don't know who it was, put forward a plan, and the planning officer or tree officer, whoever it is that comments, said, well, the issue with this tree is in perhaps 10 to 15 years when it's, you know, more mature, it could be fruit bearing.
Right.
It could. I don't know what dictates whether or not, I don't know if it's a male or female tree, I don't know how it works, but it could fruit bear. If it does, and that fruit falls...
I've had this on another site, go on.
That then could, in 15 years, be a slip hazard.
We've had this. I'm not gonna use my colleagues' names, but we had exactly the same thing. And I hadn't heard of another person that's had this until you've just said that.
So then that was the delay. So then we're like, okay, fine, right, we've got our change amendment, we've got our landscape. So then we submit all of our discharge conditions. Yeah. And we've now just had a massive ongoing issue with the soakaways. The percolation tests are amazing. You couldn't fill up the trial pits. Basically, we had to have a bit of a shared soakaway system because it's chalk, so you need a bit more distance from foundations, 10 metres instead of 5, which basically meant there wasn't the room under the current design for individual soakaway systems. Yeah. And the sort of general consensus, as soon as you go to any element of shared, everyone should share. Because when you look at like a shared system and maintenance, if only 2 people share and 1 person doesn't pay, that's 50% not paid. If 17 people share and 1 person doesn't pay, that has way less of an impact. So that's why, you know, the general consensus was you go for a, you know, shared system. So anyway, we have this soakaway system. It's got the geocellular kind of crates that look like bottle
wrapped in
crates,
the Tyvek.
Wrapped, sealed, backfilled. You'd never know it was there. We were asked for a maintenance schedule.
Yeah, this is what... Oh, now I remember what you were telling me about this. This is incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, I know a fair bit about soakaways. I'm not an engineer. I don't know them in and out. But I don't understand how you're supposed to maintain something that is purposely wrapped and sealed underground. My understanding, and then speaking to warranty providers, is actually as if you were to open up that system to inspect, because they wanted inspections as well, inspect and maintain, whatever maintain. I did ask, could you clarify what you mean by maintain? Yeah. Actually, you know, to do as the council asked would potentially risk voiding the warranty that sits behind the build. That's
the whole point. The Tyvek, you'd have to cut it open to look inside. And what are you looking for? Do you know what? Which camera am I talking to? If you're doing I'm talking to that. If anybody understands, whether it be a planning officer, a geotechnical engineer or something like that, understands what on earth a maintenance schedule or a maintenance plan for an underground crate system for a soakaway would look like, please let us know. We would like to know.
And you know, not the maintenance of the pipework, the gullies and everything that feed into it. Yeah, that's fine. The actual...
Well, you have running points and you have inspection chambers.
Yeah, so all that was standard, as you know, because yes, that can be inspected, that can be maintained. The actual soakaway trench. Yeah. So yeah, that's where, and we're still ongoing
And
with that matter now.
it does feel to me like planning officers today are much less from the discipline and experienced and knowledgeable from the discipline that they are overseeing. You see what I mean? So you've got people that are dealing with your landscaping that aren't landscapers. You've got people that are dealing with ventilation or noise that are not noise.
They aren't experts in the field.
They're not trained in acoustics or ventilation.
Yeah.
And it just feels like that rings very much of that you've got someone saying, okay, you've got to soak away. How are you going to maintain the crates?
Yeah, you've got a drainage system.
Well, you don't.
And I want to be seen to ask for maintenance.
Yeah,
but you don't understand the drainage
ask,
system. So that's unfortunately where we are at. The question was, what's Newman Rose doing? So that one, we're hopefully now...
I'm glad you're bringing us back to the question.
Hopefully we're basically there now. We've got an issue with I don't want permeable membrane driveways because they're expensive and a nightmare for build when gullies and interceptors do
absolutely fine,
equally as good job, but make it more deliverable. And this is a conversation I've had with the planning officer, is I've got a contractor lined up, I've got a bank, I've got a HA that wants to buy the affordable and is chasing me. I want to deliver this site. Please work with me. And I will give you the same water quality just via a different route. Why does it matter?
If he's got calculations it's like you say, it's almost like people want to be seen to be asking the questions, or they want to be seen to be doing their job. It doesn't matter about the outcomes. Yeah,
what it is, and a lot of authorities are doing this now, they have hierarchies within decision making, and you get it a lot with things like drainage and water quality, for example, where they say our preferred method is permeable tarmac, permeable membranes for achieving the certain water qualities. Okay, great. That's perceivably more eco-friendly, arguably more sustainable. I don't know enough about the facts as to why. But if you ask a developer, it's way more expensive to build, and you can't, they're not very good at weight bearing. But when you're loading kitchens into a site, where do you put the forks? Where's the forklift drive? Goes onto the driveway, doesn't it? We've now damaged the driveway.
Brilliant.
So you're having to now read it. So not only is it expensive to start with, but there's then, in terms of sort of prelims on site, get more expensive because of, just moving about site becomes more difficult, and there will be repair costs. So as developers, when you then also throw in all the contributions we have to put in, the rise in build costs anyway, the rise in finance costs, when we can deliver the same water quality with a method that is cheaper to build and easier to deliver.
And show it with calculations.
You can come do inspections if you want, spend all that time and energy that you put into asking for maintenance schedules, come and inspect the work, get sign-offs, change sign-off procedure, fine. But either way, we would end up with the same water quality, but in a way that is more deliverable. Why is that not the solution? And the reason is because all they think about is, we've got to do it in line with this, with this hierarchy of decision making. But that is so siloed, it doesn't take into account literally anything else. And that's the issue. And so you've got, for example, flood authority, that's their silo. You then have the police who ask for, a 9-foot fence at the back of a residential site. So, okay, what about the GDV values on the back end?
Yeah.
So everyone's got their own silo. No one thinks about, actually, this is a cohesive project that we all want to fix the housing,
the crisis,
apparently. No one stops to think about any of the considerations and how they might put up against each other. And actually that
like the perfect example is noise and ventilation. I've dealt with it in the last week. You want less noise to
better ventilation
to living spaces, but you want better ventilation, and then they're arguing over, they're not arguing. It's like parents arguing over a child's head, isn't it? That's how it feels to me. You got mummy saying, have openable windows, and daddy's saying, but it's going to be
noisy,
too loud.
And then
but we need ventilation.
Yeah. No, it's exactly that. And that's
we're like abused children, aren't we, Rosie?
Developers are abused. We are the products of divorce.
Yeah.
But no, unfortunately, so that's where we are with Cambridge, and we're very close now, it seems.
Wonderful. Is there anyone you know that you really, really look up to, other than your father and your brother, outside of your family, that you look at and go, how do you know so much about construction, planning, this, that, and the other? Who are your heroes in the game?
It does sound cliche, but I've been asked this a lot, and it's not just because he's my dad, but
Yeah.
before anyone, it is my dad. He could single-handedly build a house.
Yeah.
There is nothing.
Well, didn't he do that?
Well, yeah, but like the
Pretty much.
family home,
Yeah.
like was basically done by him. But there's a lad that works for my dad, Alex, and we always joke like there is nothing you can ask, no matter how technical, about a foundation design, about a retaining wall, about how a digger works, about this type of brickwork, about this roofing detail, this electrical. Does not matter. He knows the answer, and not just I could give a vague answer on a lot of things, but or I could give a educated answer based on the other knowledge I had that it'd probably work like this. He knows it like a textbook.
Yeah.
He is an expert in basically every field.
A scientist.
Yeah, and I don't understand how he does. Like, I don't understand how he's got the knowledge. So, and I've genuinely never come across anyone
as knowledgeable and experienced
that rivals.
So when's he coming on? When's he guesting with us?
If you can get him on,
Get him in for us.
To be fair, he would be really interesting. You need quite a long time. He can talk.
Yeah. We'll separate off a good half day for him.
Yeah, but no, it is, and I'm so, and I always say this. I am so fortunate.
Yeah.
To have had him.
Yeah.
Or have him.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was dead. Have him as my father because. Now let's say on Cambridge there's a foundation detail or something with the drainage, or when I'm on site something's looking a bit funny, I could call him and he's a busy man. He'll spend I could be like, Dad, quick one, and I literally just want a quick answer. Should I do this, yes or no? I won't just get a yes or no, I'll get a yes, here's why, here's the explanation.
Always why.
And I'll be on the phone for an hour. It's like an ongoing joke. If you speak to my dad, you book an hour in the diary to speak to him, which is like, it's funny, but also that's where I've got my knowledge from, is because he's been willing to give me that. He has it fundamentally, but he will, and he can explain it, the drawings he can do to explain it and articulate it. It's unbelievable. So I've come across people who have more money than my dad, who have done more projects than my dad, who wear a nicer suit than my dad, but I've never met anyone that's more knowledgeable or a nicer person.
That's fantastic.
And and other people in the industry will attest to that as well. It's not just me as his daughter. So there literally isn't anyone more inspirational than my dad, for sure.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Very lucky.
I am. I'm very blessed to have the big man.
We wanted to talk a little bit more about planning, even though it's done to death, but it is the issue of the day for what we do. We've had data come out today that from 2012, 2013, we were looking at 56% of major planning applications to be given a decision within the statutory 13-week period. We are in 2023 down to 19%. Comments, please.
I think for anyone that doesn't understand, the statutory period being the period that they are meant to decide within. Yeah. So
that's the longest. That's statutory. That's So that's what the planning authority, the government, say they commit to us as developers. If you submit an application, it will be decided. So in terms of our decision making, our business planning, everything. We're going to have if we submit today, in 13 weeks time, we will have a decision, approval, refusal, whatever, we will have it decided in 13 weeks. Less than 20% of applications are actually having that achieved. So that's just... And we're up to 2 years for 2 years. How many years does it take to get planning permission for different size developments? Units 50 to 99, we're up to 2 years. Incredible.
2 years, which, as far as I'm concerned, how are you supposed to offer on sites? How, and we can talk about this, like mitigating the risk, but it's why it's so difficult to do deals, is because how as a developer, how can anyone predict everything in the next 2 year period? And that's before you even put a spade in the ground. You're 2 years down the line. Build costs, just everything, the market, everything.
Supply chains.
Even the landowner might say, well, everything may go in our favour. I mean, when does that ever happen? But, we could have an absolute boom in house prices. And great, we've got the land for a steal. But then the landowner's like, well, I've been robbed. So it works kind of, both ways. Yes, but I think, but we had a quick pause in recording and I mentioned, I can't remember, maybe someone can comment what the actual term is. It's like a planning performance bond, or something that not every council's doing, certain councils are now doing, where the developer or the applicant, I suppose, can pay an additional fee of, I know someone that did it, and it was like, I know one person who's in like a networking group that I'm in, who said that they had an application and they did it for like £100,000. They paid this extra, I'm going to call it the planning performance bond. I don't know if that's what it's actually called.
Yeah.
Other people, it could be 6,000, 10,000, but it's, it's not
To
pocket money.
guarantee within a certain time frame, or to be within the statutory time frame.
So what they say is, if you pay us this, we guarantee we will actually
expedite
we will do it within the statutory period
that you're supposed to be
that
doing.
You're supposed to be doing it in anyway,
Yeah.
and just ignore.
Amazing.
And I know people that they've paid that and they still haven't done it.
Incredible. And
It's like,
we're facing now increased planning application fees.
increased charges.
So we've got 25% on minor developments, 35% on major developments increase, and the Department for Levelling Up, DLUC, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, are saying that they don't even want to ring fence those increased fees to be used on the planning system. So they want us to pay higher fees for planning applications, but we'll decide what we do with that. Yeah. So while the excuse is the planning system is
underfunded,
fair to say that it's broken. I'd say it's broken. It's because of being underfunded, understaffed. Okay, increase the fees, but we aren't promising where that funding goes. Brilliant. Yeah. How do we get through this?
I think, there's been talk of planning reform now for ever, but we're now at I think it's the lowest application rate or approval rate. Can't remember. Definitely, I think we've had the lowest number of applications.
Yeah.
I think it's like down 50% on the previous year. But since we started, I say we, the government or whoever started recording the data, which I think was like 15 to 17 years ago, we have had the lowest number of applications made.
So what do you take from that? What do you
People aren't bothering.
People don't want to. Yeah.
It's too expensive. It's too risky. It's too long. People don't want to do it anymore. Landowners aren't doing it themselves because, before a landowner could submit planning and it maybe be quite cheap and then they could sell it to a developer. You can't do a cheap application now. No. So it's only developers. And developers are saying, no, I don't want to do this game anymore. And they're moving out the market.
Yeah.
So, there's less applications being made because it's so expensive to apply and apply not just from obviously the application costs as we spoke about, but everything that's required within an application, the reports, the drawings, the time, it's not worth it.
Do you think there's a positive silver lining to that for developers that do stick it out, that maybe this all comes full circle and the ones that survive this crisis, this threat that we're talking about, there's more for us? Or
yeah, as I said, I think if you've got the skill set, and again, I'll sort of talk about mitigating planning risk in a second. Yeah. If you have got the skill set, great. You're just going to be,
the sadistic nature to continue doing this.
Yeah, exactly. The mindset to just graft it through.
Yeah.
If you've got that, you're going to see it out. And ultimately, we're just going to face more supply issues, which I know at the minute we're facing sort of a decrease in house prices. But overall, over the next 5 years, house prices are only going to go up more because
it's how the system's built. That will continue.
We said about affordable housing earlier. If you flood the system with oversupply, price comes down. We don't have that situation. We have undersupply.
Yeah.
So prices are only going to go up. So one of the benefits, I suppose, of a 2-year planning cycle is that just lengthens the deal cycle, which means most likely your GDVs on the back end are going to be higher. So there definitely are some benefits. I just think that to get you through this process, whereas in the past you could just offer a straight X for land, I'll give you £1 million for the land.
Yeah.
It's getting harder to just offer on that basis because of the risk that comes with planning.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you can mitigate that risk as much as possible by getting creative, you will reap the rewards at the back end for sure.
Tell us about that. Tell us about mitigation of planning risk.
I think.
And what does creative look like to you?
For me, mitigating planning risk comes from 3 main areas. One, your contract timescales and the type of contract you're in, and the price and the way that price is structured. So basically, you're the way you're buying that piece of land, how you structure the payments to professionals to minimize costs within the planning process, consultants,
designers.
Things like that. And then the capital structure in which you're buying, or the way you borrow money, allocate money.
Yes.
So in terms of, how you buy the land. So in the past, where we had, just a straight, I'll give you £1 million for your land. We now, I think pretty much every offer I've made is some sort of prorated offer. Basically, if I get this, you get that. If I get more, you get more. If I get less, you get less. So it's a heads you win, tails you don't lose situation, because it's so unpredictable what you'll get at planning.
Yeah.
That to say I'll give, yes, I could give you a fixed price, but it would be very lowballed.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I can be comfortable with the risk.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the risk of what I would get at planning, but how long is it going to take? How much a build cost going to shift or how much a cost going to fluctuate up or down in that time. So, things that we look at now in our offer structures are prorated offers.
Yeah.
I.e., for each plot, I'll give you £100,000, or for each square foot achieved at planning, I'll give you £60 per square foot, whatever that might look like.
Yeah.
Overages. So, if the total end values exceed £400 per square foot on average, £500, whatever you think is reasonable, the landowner would get an extra 50% of everything over an agreed figure.
Yeah.
Which, again, if you're appraising based on only getting 380 and this kicks in at 400 and you achieve 420, okay, you're only going to get 50% of that, but that's 50% of something you didn't expect to get anyway.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
So, getting creative in packaging the deals in that way, so that, if the worst case happens, you've still got a site that works.
Something that I've thought about recently that seems to be popping up, that we are exploring in great detail ourselves, that seems such a great strategy. Have you looked at the self-build market much?
From a planning perspective?
So, well, not just from planning, but even just as an overall strategy, because it's like you say, it's like a pro rata sort of thing that, if you just say you've got a 20-unit site and the owner will accept payment as the sites are taken.
Yeah.
And you just provide the pads, and then if you're the builder, you do the build as well. That would be our strategy.
Yeah.
But it seems like such a brilliant strategy.
Yeah, definitely. We've looked at that. That each authority has a requirement to deliver so many self-build plots. The funding can be better because it's essentially like mini forward funds.
Yeah. It's quite a progressive, so it's seen as quite a progressive thing as well.
Yeah. And again, that's where you're getting creative with the vendor, because you could do a self-build plot where you just buy the land.
Yeah.
And then you do the self-build elements. Yeah. Or you could do it, as you say, where that's kind of, I'd class that as like a stage payment situation. Yeah. So that's another way we get creative is in that situation, it's as each plot sells, you get that. So as we get the money from the buyer,
cash flow, brilliant for
cost of finance.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So that's a stage payment. So that's another thing that we might say is, okay, you want £2 million. If I put £2 million into the appraisal, that doesn't work. But I could give you £1 million day one, and then on the back end, or halfway through, I can give you an extra 200,000 and another 800,000. However it works, basically to keep the landowner happy, you happy, and the bank happy. You can stage payments, or the risk of a stage payment is that's a fixed price. So if I said to a landowner, I'll give you £2 million, but across these stage payments, regardless of how that deal goes, you're getting £2 million.
Yeah.
Whereas if I say I give you £1 million day one plus a 10% profit share,
brilliant.
That's less risky for you.
Yeah. It
could mean, depending on how much profit, you pay them more than they initially wanted. But if the deal doesn't go as well, then it's 10% of whatever's left, of whatever profit there is, and that's immovable.
Could be worth it for you.
Exactly. So that again, that's where you're getting creative to minimise the risk. In terms of cost of planning, there's some costs we can't avoid: planning application fees, report fees.
Yeah.
In terms of mitigating planning costs, it's really with your consultants and back-ending the fees to success as much as possible.
Yeah.
So overall, you will pay more for that. I know some consultants who will say the fee is 30 grand now, it's double, but paid all on success.
Yeah.
But if you know there's a big planning uplift, you'd rather pay double and minimise the cash flow outlay
Yeah.
for the period that it takes, but also the risk. If you don't get planning, that's 30 grand you've saved. So, in terms of mitigating planning costs, that's it's really, with your professionals. Obviously, also understanding I always recommend people get really familiar and intimate with the authority that you're applying within.
Yeah.
Understand their decision making, because the same policies applied to different authorities will give you different results. Because there's no objectivity.
It's interpretations.
It's how, it's the classic, I text you something and you thought I meant it in an arsey way, and I actually meant it in a nice way, but it's because you thought my full stop was aggressive.
I suppose
it's that sort of thing.
The devolution of power to the local authorities is arbitrary when it gets to them, I suppose.
Exactly. So, getting really familiar with, obviously, policies adopted at a local level that may influence decision making, then they may slightly differ from national planning policy.
Ideological, so it depends on the actual the councillors and so on.
For sure, definitely, and where they are in their
political
local
spectrum,
votes and all that sort of stuff.
Election cycles and so on.
Exactly. And also, the actual decisions that are coming out of that authority. Look at the approvals, look at the refusals, understand why something was approved and wasn't, because that will help you with hopefully only bringing forward sites that will get approved. You want to be quite confident that you're in chance with at least an approval of some assortment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of mitigating the planning risk from the actual planning application perspective. Yeah. And then for me, the only other way to mitigate risk in the planning process is from your capital structure. Yeah. So for me, I would be nowadays very, very wary about taking on any sort of debt to fund applications or really anything to do with the planning stage, because debt has an obligation to be paid back within a certain time frame, right? And if it's not paid back, it can get very expensive, it can start compounding. And what if you get refused? And then it's, unless you've got another deal to sort of plug that gap, for me, that's super risky.
Yeah. I remember coming to Mill Street in Leamington to see Newman Rose talking, yourself, Tyler, and you're talking to all these up-and-coming developers and so on. The one area that I was shocked at how much information and how much, and at the risk of flattering you, how much you guys are clued up on, it was the finance stuff. Mm-hmm. There is a world of finance out there that will blow your mind, and Newman Rose is great for that.
Yeah, I think
that's a strong suit for you guys.
100%. It's one of our our strongest elements within the business. And a lot of old school developers, they would just go to the high street banks and they'd get the lending they needed, and the world was much simpler and the banks were much nicer and the deals didn't have as many costs in them. There was kind of your build costs and professional fees, bit of contingency, and then you sold it. Yeah. Whereas now there's like costs from every angle, and things don't work as simply. So
would you say the high street won't touch developers at the minute, or they will? But
so from my understanding of speaking to different brokers, different banks, is so your high street lenders, they obviously mainly operate in the regulated market as opposed to the unregulated market, which is what development finance falls into. They do have call it a pot for development finance, but overall they are a very low risk profile bank. Yeah. So the developers they will lend against are either unbelievably experienced, so your big house builders, or they want to lend on very low gearing, and typically they want the site to have you to just own the site outright, basically, and they'll just cover not even all the bill costs in that situation. So
really, they'll separate out the different packages and stuff.
Yeah, so they'll say we'll give you of the remaining costs. So you're not having to buy land; you own the land. Typically, historically, they'd say if you own the land, we'll give you all the other costs.
Right.
Nowadays, some high streets won't even do that. You'd have to put in additional equity yourself just because of the risk profile. So they're still lending, but it's for me not good lending for most developers. Unless you're unbelievably cash rich and maybe have a land bank. Yeah. So really, it's the challenger banks where most, and that they're operating in the unregulated market. Yeah. So that makes them sound like sharks. It's not.
I understand.
It's not that. It's just that development isn't a regulated.
Yeah, well, we're talking about mitigating risk.
Yeah.
And
They're
we as,
mitigating risk.
we as developers do it, so why wouldn't the financial institutions do it too?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the high streets do lend still, but
again, I'm noticing that as with planning, as with application fees, as with now we're talking about the finance structures of these deals. It feels like we keep circling back to the point that the juggernauts, the blue chip £1 billion house builders, they're sitting pretty in terms of they can shoulder the burden of these pressures, and it's the SME developers that will, and the independent developers that are trying to provide something a little different, so we don't end up with cookie cutter toy towns. We're the ones that are looking to go the way of the dinosaurs. What would that entail? Do you think that we would look towards nationalizing the house building industry, or not that you're in politics, but do you think that that's,
I think,
not to be conspiratorial,
not to be conspiratorial,
but
I think you're right. We are seeing that the house builders are better geared to
shoulder
it, only because they're shutting down sites. Is it the ethical thing to do? Lay people off left, right, and centre? No. I know a lot of house builders where the director would worry about food on other people's table, as I would if it was my site.
Well, I know that your father would, my father would.
Yeah,
I would.
He'd keep these people, these bricklayers, these whoever, in literally until the site went under. They would put other people first.
Absolutely.
The big house builders don't.
No.
They will say you're not on site tomorrow.
Yeah, it's cutthroat. I've gone through those revolving doors of all those big construction companies, and it's a cutthroat world. Yeah,
and that's not necessarily it's a criticism maybe from a moral ground, but from a business perspective, you've got to do what you got to do. And they've got boards, they've got, they're public. It's not. It just is what it is. So yes, they are better positioned. They have land banks. They have better funding lines. Yep. So and they have rolling funding lines.
And even down to things like having a land bank obviously gives you certain benefits, but even down to things like BNG credits. Like the whole system feels so. If you've got land elsewhere and you're struggling with BNG on one side, you can just build a pond or a play area or this or that, offset it for.
Whereas we as small would have to pay someone else or something.
Yeah, either buy it off a farmer. Yeah. Or I heard DEFRA are actually selling their own. They will actually supply you with off-site credits. So you can pay the government department or a subsidiary of the government department
to solve the issue they've created.
Yeah, I think they call it like a non-departmental public body or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
same stuff, another label.
Yeah. That's right. But it all feels like it's geared to shift things towards the bigger companies.
Yeah, and not to sound kind of conspiratorial, but I do think that whether or not it's because they don't want SMEs, I don't think it's that. I think it's just they like simple systems and processes.
Yeah.
They want sites taken through the local plan. They don't want, it makes enough, they call it speculative planning now, when you just apply to the planning authority. Yeah. If it's not taken through the local plan, they call it speculative, which it's like, sorry, it's the process. So they want sites taken through the local plan, with all their own self-contained infrastructure,
strategies and that kind of stuff.
And that does lend itself to the big house builders. And I think they just want the ease that comes with that.
I think there's a phrase: don't attribute malice where stupidity will suffice. I think that it's very easy to get into the mindset of they're actually trying to kill us all. They're actually trying to kill the SME independent house builder. Whereas you're probably right in saying that it's easier for them, and maybe they just see things in this.
I don't think it's a malicious persecution.
Yeah, that's probably,
put it that way,
sensible. Although it's fun to think that we're under attack.
It's fun to, and it feels like we're under attack. And we are inadvertently. Yeah. I just think that their incompetence and laziness result in them wanting a simple process, which caters to the big house builders and not the SMEs.
Yeah, that's probably quite rational and proportionate.
Yeah.
And even wind that back slightly, even if we're not talking about the nationalisation of the house building industry, even just to as we're talking about, destroy the SME independent house builder from offering something else in the market.
They should be actively support. And I know that there's like Homes England out there, and I know
Homes England are fantastic.
They're doing their bits, really trying. There is certain niches of support, and there's even some planning policies where they encourage this competition in the market,
and the non-governmental organisations, the HBA, and what was the one you were telling me about before the podcast that you've joined the board of?
The Developers Club.
The Developers Club.
There are that.
We've still got a voice. We're not dead yet.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people backing us. It's just that a lot of the loudest policies, that the biggest issues that we face, planning, aren't geared towards.
It's like it's falling on deaf
towards
ears
the
a
SME.
bit. Rico from the HBA, who's our mouthpiece, and he is the HBA. Sometimes I just sense in him this feeling of, it just feels like such a beating your head against a brick wall kind of conversation to be putting forward us as developers, what we're finding, what our experience is, and what we see as a real genuine threat, not just to us, not just to developers, but to the fabric of
the concept of us.
The fabric of society and the fabric of the housing market, how it works, and the landscape that we're moving in. It just feels like it's falling on deaf ears at the moment, but I'm sure we'll get through it.
We will, because I think developers are some of the most creative, resilient people I've ever come across. You have to be. And I think for that reason, it will continue. It will shake some people out of the market, put some people into earlier retirements.
Cream rises to the top.
But the cream rises to the top. And I think developers are literally some of the most phenomenal people I've come across, just in their mental strength, their stoicism, their ability to just keep going, their patience. There's always going to be a market for it. Unfortunately, I don't think I don't feel supported at all by the government.
I'll second that.
I feel worked against actively. Like I said, I don't think that's from a malicious point of view. I think it's just from an incompetence position that's happening. But it is the byproduct. But we'll still be here.
I think maybe because we're few and far between, we don't represent a large suffrage, a large vote, a large numbers.
And also, who wants to hear,
the poor developers.
It's like
it's not as romantic as the idea of the poor
homeless person.
The poor homeless person, the poor nurse that's done a 12-hour shift, this, that, and the other, which I agree with. But there's no reason why.
But a lot of these things can be supported by supporting us as well.
And to come back to the issue of why we think the free market is the answer to is of such great benefit. One thing that I believe is that the world is not a zero-sum game. So earning one person's support politically doesn't mean you lose another's. No. Just because one person does well or makes profit on a deal or a project doesn't mean that someone else is losing. That's not how wealth works. That's not how politics works. So again, like we were saying about planning officers and local authorities working with developers to come up with the solutions that suit all interests of all stakeholders, it should be the same thing on the big picture, that politically and economically developers are valued for what we represent in society, supported and so on, not at the expense of other people, but even to the benefit. A rising tide lifts all ships. It should be that developers come into an area, people should be over the moon because they're like, we're all going to get something out of this.
No, 100%. And I'd love to see more support for the SME developers. Whether or not it's going to happen from the government anyway.
Yeah. So as builders, we're looking always at the next crop of builders, and there is a skills shortage, and CITB are probably the main body that will help us create that next crop of people that are going to be able to actually physically build homes and other things. What about the next crop of developers? And you're probably best placed to talk about that because of your work with Newman Rose on the educational side. what do you see? Do you see promise?
Massive promise. I think now is, you have to be so, there was a lot of, I call it old boys club mentality.
Yeah.
We all go to the pub, we all smoke, we all drink together, and then that's how we do our business, and we shake hands and it's done.
Yeah.
That doesn't get you through anymore. A lot of, you know, talking like you're the big guy and all that stuff, it doesn't work anymore. A lot of people, you know, kind of, you know, in the sub 40 age group, it's a different mentality. They're so much more sophisticated. And you mentioned about Tyler and I with our finance knowledge. I think that's becoming a requirement. You have to understand the capital markets. You have to understand how to pitch yourself.
Yeah, especially as a young person.
100%.
You can't sit in front of a lender, particularly as a young person, you come in the room and say, "Who's this? You know, young a lady or or
anyone,
a man?" And you know these people. But then when you open your mouth.
You have to prove...
this person knows what they're talking about.
Exactly. You know, so I believe that the difficulties in the market from planning, from funding, from construction are forcing upskilling.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be better.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to succeed now, you have to be better, you have to be smarter, you have to work harder. I like that. Yeah. Because
I mean, we're seeing
I do all those things, so it's not a problem.
We're seeing like 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds like Jack, like Phoebe, that are literally doing their first deals and doing them successfully.
Yeah. And, the opportunities...
moving on to the next one.
Yeah, the opportunity's still out there. Yeah. You just have to find it and invest in yourself in terms of your knowledge, your skill set. You know, Tyler and I have spent tens of thousands of pounds with mentors to teach us about capital markets, raising equity, compliance around equity. You know, we're constantly investing in ourselves. I'm constantly asking questions of the professional team who I'm paying, not for consultancy to teach me, but I'm learning from them as they work on my projects. Yeah. Always, you know, reading stuff, watching content produced by, you know, other people. So much information on YouTube, for example. You could teach yourself more from YouTube than you could in a university degree about most topics. Yes. So, you know, I think the next crop of developers are going to be the best we've ever had.
Oh, that's good.
What 100? Because you know the market's harder. Yeah. If you survive now, you're better.
Yeah. What a wonderful morning! Great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Wish you all the best of luck with Cambridgeshire.
Thank you.
And with all the other developments you got on. Get your dad on. We want him guesting. So start planting that seed in his mind, and promise to come back and give us some updates soon.
Definitely, yeah. And any updates, anyone who wants to follow me on social media, it's just Rosey, Rosey Cassidy on all my socials, where I document everything that's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Brilliant. And we'll put all the links in the description and so on.
Please.
Thanks, Rosey.
Thank you very much.